The 1967 Mustang coughed once and died beneath a sky the color of old steel. The woman beside it wore dark glasses, a borrowed denim jacket, and the guarded expression of someone escaping a life too bright to bear. Mason Reed saw only a stranded driver. He did not see the face printed on billboards from Los Angeles to New York. He did not know that millions of people recognized her smile. And he had no idea that fixing her car would quietly change 3 lives forever. Mason was driving home along a Tulane, Tennessee highway when steam curled from beneath the Mustang's hood. His 12-year-old pickup rattled over the shoulder, carrying a toolbox, 2 grocery bags, and his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, who sat drawing horses in the passenger seat. Mason could have continued. The repair shop had closed an hour earlier. Rain was gathering over the hills, and every minute mattered when dinner still needed cooking. But dignity often appears in ordinary choices, especially when no one is watching. He eased onto the gravel. "Stay inside, sweetheart. Is she okay?" Lily asked. "We are going to find out." Mason stepped into the cool wind and approached the woman without urgency or suspicion. She watched him carefully, one hand resting near the open driver's door. Her chestnut hair had been tucked beneath a faded baseball cap, but even dressed plainly, she carried herself with practiced control. "Engine trouble?" he asked. "That seems obvious." Her reply came sharper than intended. Mason glanced at the smoke, then back at her. "Fair point." The woman lowered her gaze. "I am sorry. It has been a difficult day. Those usually arrive without asking permission." Something in his tone made her shoulders loosen. He introduced himself, but she hesitated before offering only her first name. "Ava." To the country, she was Ava Monroe, an award-winning actress whose latest movie had earned more than $300 million. To Mason, she was simply Ava, stranded 14 miles outside Bellwood with an old car and no signal. He opened the hood. The air smelled of hot metal, wet earth, and gasoline. A loose fuel hose trembled near the carburetor, while a cracked clamp threatened to leave the Mustang useless before the storm arrived. Mason rolled up his sleeves. "Can you fix it?" "Probably." "How much?" "Let me make it run first." She studied his worn work shirt and grease-marked hands. "People usually ask what I can afford. A broken car does not care." For the first time that afternoon, Ava smiled without performing for anyone. Mason replaced the clamp with a spare from his toolbox, secured the hose, and checked the connections twice. Rain tapped softly against the windshield. From inside the pickup, Lily watched the stranger with growing fascination. Ava turned the key. The Mustang roared back to life, deep and steady. Relief crossed her face, followed by something more fragile. "You have no idea what this means." Mason closed the hood. "It means you can get home." Before she could answer, the pickup door opened. Lily stepped onto the gravel, clutching her purple school backpack. She stared at Ava, then at the glossy movie character printed across the fabric. Her eyes widened. "Dad?" she whispered, holding up the backpack. "Why is that woman wearing Ava's face?" The highway seemed to fall silent. Ava removed her glasses, and Mason finally understood that the stranger he had helped was not running from car trouble. Lily stared at the woman beside the Mustang, then slowly raised her purple backpack until the printed movie poster faced them both. "That is you," she said, her voice barely louder than the rain. Ava glanced toward the empty highway before lowering her sunglasses. "Yes, but I need you to keep it secret for a little while." "Why would someone famous need a secret?" Lily asked. Ava gave a faint smile that carried more weariness than joy. "Because sometimes the whole world knows your name, but nobody asks how you are doing." Mason watched her carefully. Without the glasses, Ava Monroe was even more striking than she appeared on screen, with graceful features, bright gray eyes, and chestnut hair escaping beneath her faded cap. Yet beneath that remarkable beauty was a woman who looked exhausted from being watched. Lily nodded with solemn determination. "I will not tell anyone, not even your best friend." "Mason?" asked. Lily hesitated. "I will try very hard." Ava laughed, and for the first time, the sound felt natural rather than polished. The shower thickened, pattering against the Mustang and turning the roadside dust into dark earth. Mason closed his toolbox and wiped his hands on a clean rag. "The new clamp should get you moving, but the fuel hose needs a proper inspection. My shop is about 14 miles back in Bellwood. Could I follow you there?" Ava asked. Of course. A black sport utility vehicle appeared beyond the bend, moving slowly in their direction. Ava's expression changed at once. She pulled the cap lower and angled her face away from the road. Mason noticed. Do you recognize that vehicle? Maybe. Photographers have been tracking me since yesterday. Why? Because they think I owe them every private moment. Mason did not press her. He moved his pickup between the passing vehicle and the Mustang, then lifted the hood again as if the repair were unfinished. Stand on this side and keep looking down. Ava obeyed, surprised by his calm authority. You are not going to ask what I am running from. You will tell me when you are ready. The sport utility vehicle slowed for several seconds, then continued past them. Ava released a careful breath. Most people ask questions before they offer help. Most people confuse curiosity with concern. Through the pickup window, Lily had opened her sketchbook. She drew 3 figures beneath an enormous umbrella, adding a bright yellow car behind them even though the Mustang was blue. Ava saw the picture and smiled. Your daughter is wonderful. Mason looked toward Lily, tenderness softening his tired face. She has been through more than a child should. Her mother? Ava asked gently. She passed away 3 years ago. The sounds of the highway seemed to retreat. I am sorry. Mason nodded once. Lily still sets a place for her on certain holidays. I have never told her to stop. Ava looked down at the rainwater gathering along the chrome bumper. Does it become easier? No. It becomes different. He placed the rag inside his toolbox. Grief does not erase love. It teaches love how to remain without being seen. The words settled between them with quiet weight. Ava had spent months surrounded by people who praised her appearance, managed her career, and measured her value in headlines. This stranger, with worn boots and grease beneath his fingernails, had spoken to the hidden part of her life without even knowing it existed. Mason secured the toolbox in his truck bed. Stay close behind me. The next few miles have poor visibility. Ava returned to the Mustang and started the engine. It answered with a strong, even rumble. As Mason's battered pickup pulled onto the wet road, she followed through the green Tennessee hills, unaware that the small garage ahead would soon become the only place in America where she could breathe without pretending. The rain had weakened to a silver mist when Mason guided the pickup beneath the faded sign of Reed Automotive. The garage stood at the edge of Bellwood, a modest brick building with 2 service bays, an aging soda machine, and a small office warmed by an amber desk lamp. Ava parked the Mustang inside, away from the road, while Lily hurried ahead to switch on the overhead lights. Their low electric hum filled the space. Welcome to the fanciest garage in Tennessee, Lily announced. Mason glanced at a crooked calendar and a stack of unpaid invoices. Do not oversell it. Ava stepped from the car and looked around with unexpected affection. There were no cameras, assistants, velvet ropes, or voices demanding her attention. Only the scent of motor oil, fresh coffee, and rain drifting through the open bay. It feels peaceful, she said. It feels expensive, Mason replied, lifting the hood. Most old cars do. Ava leaned against the workbench as he examined the fuel line. The Mustang belonged to my father. He had good taste. He had patience. I did not inherit enough of it. Mason removed the damaged hose and studied the brittle rubber. You kept the car in excellent condition. I paid people to keep it that way. That is not the same as caring about it. Ava raised an eyebrow. You make many observations for a man who does not ask questions. Observations are free. Questions can cost people their privacy. His answer made her quiet. Lily sat on a rolling stool nearby, coloring the 3 figures from her roadside sketch. She had added a red roof, a flower garden, and a dog that none of them owned. Ava crouched beside her. Who lives in that house? People who do not have to pretend, Lily said. Mason stopped turning the wrench. Ava's smile trembled before she steadied it. That sounds like a good place. You can visit. Lily, Mason said gently. What? She looks like she needs somewhere. Ava stared at the drawing, and the famous confidence that carried her across premieres and interviews seemed to dissolve beneath a child's honest kindness. Before she could respond, tires rolled across the wet gravel outside. A polished white sedan stopped near the office. Mason recognized the driver immediately. Grant Holloway owned 3 dealerships across the county and never entered a room without making sure everyone noticed. He stepped beneath the awning, adjusted his tailored jacket, and scanned the shop. Reed, I need that transmission estimate before morning. It will be ready. Grant's attention shifted to Ava. His posture changed. Do I know you? Ava turned toward the shelves, pulling the cap lower. She is a customer, Mason said. Grant moved closer, studying her reflection in the office window. A customer with a very familiar face. Her car needs work. That is all. You always were protective of lost causes. Mason set the tool down with deliberate care. People are not causes, Grant. The garage grew still except for water ticking from the roof. Grant gave a dismissive smile, but Mason did not raise his voice or step forward. He simply stood between Ava and the stranger's curiosity with the kind of composure no expensive suit could purchase. Lily watched from her stool. Ava watched even more closely. I will return tomorrow, Grant said at last. Have my estimate ready. When the sedan disappeared beyond the corner, Ava released a measured breath. You did not have to do that. Mason returned to the engine. Yes, I did. Why? Because respect should not depend on whether someone is recognized. Ava looked at him for a long moment. Then her phone, silent since the highway, lit across the workbench with 17 missed calls and one urgent message from her manager. A photograph had already appeared online. It showed the blue Mustang beside Mason's pickup, and beneath it was a single question spreading across the country. Who is the mystery mechanic with Ava Monroe? Ava read the message twice while the phone vibrated again against the steel workbench. They found me, she said. Mason continued fastening the replacement hose. Who did? Everyone. Lily slid off the stool and peered at the screen. The photograph had already gathered thousands of comments, most of them guessing that Mason was an actor, a secret boyfriend, or part of a publicity campaign. Ava's manager called once more. This time, she answered. Where are you? A sharp voice demanded. Somewhere safe. Your name is trending. Reporters are searching every town along that highway. Then tell them I am unavailable. Ava, you cannot disappear the week before the premiere. I did not disappear. I took a drive. In your father's car, without security, after canceling an interview. Do you understand how this looks? Ava glanced toward Mason. His attention remained on the engine, but his jaw had tightened slightly. It looks like I needed one day that belonged to me. The call ended without agreement. Outside, the last of the storm moved east, leaving puddles beneath the parking lot lamps. Bellwood's evening traffic passed in distant waves, unaware that one of the most recognizable women in America was standing inside a neighborhood garage. Mason tested the fuel pressure, listened closely, then shut off the engine. You need a new line from the tank forward. I can finish it tomorrow morning. I cannot stay in town, Ava replied. Not if they are coming. Lily looked disappointed. You could hide at our house. Mason turned. Lily, we have a guest room. It holds winter coats and a broken lamp. The lamp still works sometimes. Ava smiled, but her gaze drifted toward the office, where a red notice rested beside the invoices. She had seen enough financial documents to recognize a final payment warning. Is the shop in trouble? Mason followed her eyes and placed the notice face down. That is not your concern. You helped me without knowing anything about me. That does not purchase access to my problems. His words were firm, never unkind. Ava was accustomed to people presenting their hardships the moment they learned who she was. Mason did the opposite. He protected his burdens with the same dignity he used to protect her privacy. I was not trying to insult you, she said. I know. Then let me pay fairly for the repair. You will receive an invoice. A real one. Parts, labor, and tax. Nothing extra? Fame is not a surcharge. Lily covered a laugh with both hands. Ava shook her head in disbelief. You may be the strangest mechanic I have ever met. That is probably not a competitive category. Headlights swept across the garage door. This time, 3 vehicles stopped beside the curb. Doors opened, voices gathered, and camera flashes appeared through the front windows like distant lightning. Ava froze. Mason looked toward the office entrance, then switched off the main lights. The building settled into shadow except for the small lamp near the register. There is a rear exit, he said. It leads to the alley behind the bakery. What about you? They came looking for a celebrity. They will find a mechanic closing his shop. They will ask about me, and I will tell them your car required maintenance. That will not satisfy them. Mason met her eyes. Their satisfaction is not my responsibility. Lily took Ava's hand and guided her toward the back room. Before leaving, Ava paused beside Mason, close enough to see the fatigue beneath his composure. Why are you doing this? He looked through the glass at the growing crowd. Because a person should not have to earn the right to breathe. Ava said nothing. For years, people had praised her beauty, her talent, and her success. Yet one quiet man in a modest Tennessee garage had offered something far rarer. He had given her respect without asking for recognition. And as the first reporter knocked on the door, she realized the secret she feared losing was no longer her location. It was the fragile piece she had found beside Mason Reed. Ava and Lily slipped through the rear exit while Mason walked toward the front door alone. The alley smelled of warm bread from the closed bakery, damp pavement, and honeysuckle climbing an old wooden fence. Lily kept hold of Ava's hand as they crossed toward the pickup parked behind the building. "Daddy will be all right," she whispered. Ava glanced back at the garage windows, where flashes moved beyond the curtains. "He should not have to face them because of me. He faces hard things every day." Inside, Mason unlocked the entrance, but opened it only a few inches. Questions arrived at once. "Are you dating Ava Monroe? Did she spend the afternoon here? Was this meeting arranged?" Mason waited until the voices weakened. "A customer came to my shop with a mechanical problem. Her privacy is not merchandise. Good night." He closed the door without anger, argument, or performance. The reporters remained outside, but something in his restraint left them briefly uncertain. By the time he reached the alley, Ava was standing beside the pickup beneath a yellow security light. Even in borrowed clothes and a rain-spotted cap, she looked breathtaking, yet her expression carried none of the confidence seen on magazine covers. "You could have given them one sentence and become famous," she said. "I did give them one sentence. You know what I mean." Mason opened the driver's door for Lily. Attention is not always a gift. Ava looked toward the street. "They will follow the Mustang. Then leave it here." "And go where?" Lily answered before Mason could. "Home with us." Their house sat 6 miles outside Bellwood on a narrow road bordered by maple trees and open pasture. It was a small white farmhouse with a deep porch, a rusted mailbox, and wind chimes that played uneven notes whenever the breeze moved through. Mason parked beneath the carport and carried the groceries inside. Ava stopped at the porch steps. "I should find a hotel. Every hotel clerk within 50 miles has probably seen your picture by now," Mason said. "The guest room is imperfect, but the door locks." Lily pushed it open proudly. Winter coats hung from one wall, moving boxes occupied a corner, and the unreliable lamp flickered before glowing steadily. "See? It works when company is important." Ava smiled. "Then I am honored." Later, Mason prepared tomato soup and grilled cheese while Lily explained every school rule she considered unreasonable. Ava sat at the kitchen table listening as though the ordinary conversation were music. No one adjusted her makeup. No one checked her schedule. No one asked her to become charming on command. Above the stove hung a family photograph of Mason, Lily, and a graceful blonde woman standing near a lake. Ava recognized love in the way the frame had been dusted. Her name was Claire, Mason said without turning. "She was beautiful," Ava replied. "She was kind." The distinction settled gently between them. His phone rang on the counter. Grant Holloway's name appeared on the screen. Mason answered. "Your shop is all over the news," Grant said. "This could solve your money problem. Sell me the building tonight, and I will double my last offer." "No, think carefully. Public attention fades. Debt does not." Mason ended the call and returned to the stove, but Ava had heard every word. Before she could speak, her own phone displayed a breaking headline claiming that she had abandoned her movie contract for a secret mechanic in Tennessee. Beneath it was a photograph of Mason and Lily leaving the garage, their faces exposed to millions of strangers. Ava's hands went cold. She had spent years surviving false stories about herself. Now the same machine had reached an innocent father and his child, and she understood that remaining silent might no longer protect them. Ava turned the phone face down, but the headline had already changed the room. Lily stopped talking about school. Mason lowered the heat beneath the soup. Even the wind chimes outside seemed to lose their uneven song. "They used her picture," Ava said. "They used both of you." Mason placed 3 bowls on the table. "We cannot control what strangers publish. I can correct it. Will they listen?" "They will listen long enough to make another headline." Lily looked between them. "Did we do something wrong?" Mason knelt beside her chair. "No, sweetheart. A photograph does not know the truth, and neither do people who invent stories around it." "Then tell them the truth," she said. Ava felt the simplicity of that answer more deeply than any advice from her public relations team. Her phone rang again. This time, she accepted the call from her manager, Daniel Price. "Schedule a live statement for tomorrow morning," she said. "Absolutely not," Daniel replied. "The studio wants silence until legal reviews the contract. A child is being dragged into this. Then deny the relationship and leave Tennessee tonight." Ava glanced toward Mason. He stood near the sink, giving her space without pretending not to hear. "There is no relationship to deny." "Good. Say the mechanic approached you for publicity." Her expression hardened. "He protected me." "Then say nothing." Silence protects the powerful when the truth becomes inconvenient. Daniel paused. "You are risking a $40 million production, and you are asking me to risk someone else's dignity." She ended the call. Mason carried the bowls to the table. "You do not need to damage your career for us. My career will survive an honest sentence. Honest sentences are often edited. Then I will say enough that they cannot edit the meaning." They ate while rainwater slipped from the roof in slow, steady drops. Lily spoke less than before, but she placed half of her grilled cheese on Ava's plate without explanation. Ava accepted it as though it were something precious. Later, when Lily went upstairs to prepare the guest room, Mason stood by the back door, watching fog gather over the pasture. "Grant was right about one thing," he said. "Debt does not fade." Ava waited. "The bank gives me 30 days. After that, the shop goes to auction." "Why did you refuse his offer?" "Because Claire's father built that garage. She believed it should remain a place where people were treated fairly, even when they had little money." "You are carrying her promise." "I am trying." Ava moved beside him. "There is grace in keeping a promise, but there is no shame in accepting help. And there is danger in owing someone the world already believes I am using." "I am not offering charity." "What are you offering?" Before she could answer, headlights appeared beyond the maple trees. A dark sedan stopped near the mailbox, followed by another vehicle carrying television equipment. Someone had discovered the farmhouse. Mason immediately drew the curtains. Lily came down the stairs in her pajamas, clutching the family photograph from the hallway table. "Are they coming inside?" "No," Mason said. "This is our home." His voice held no fear, only certainty. Ava opened her phone, activated the camera, and stood before the plain kitchen wall. She removed the cap, revealing the face America knew, but when she spoke, her voice belonged entirely to herself. "My name is Ava Monroe. Mason Reed did not seek me, follow me, or ask me for anything. He repaired my father's car, protected my privacy, and showed my daughter's generation what respect looks like." Lily blinked. Mason stared. Outside, the reporters gathered beneath portable lights. Ava continued. "Tomorrow, I will tell the rest of the truth. Tonight, leave this family in peace." She posted the recording without approval, rehearsal, or permission. Within 60 seconds, the view count passed 1 million, and the noise beyond the porch disappeared into stunned silence. By sunrise, the recording had crossed 12 million views, and Bellwood had become the center of a national conversation it never asked to host. The news vans remained near the county road, but none moved past the mailbox. Ava's request had created a boundary stronger than any security detail. Inside the farmhouse, Lily poured cereal into 3 mismatched bowls while Mason brewed coffee in an old metal pot. "People are saying Daddy is a hero," she announced, reading comments from Ava's phone. Mason set the mugs down. "Fixing a fuel line does not make anyone a hero." "They are also saying you are handsome," Lily added. Ava nearly spilled her coffee. Mason gave his daughter a patient look. "You are done reading comments." Lily carried her bowl toward the table with a satisfied grin. Ava sat near the window, morning light tracing the refined lines of her face and turning her gray eyes almost silver. Even without makeup, styled hair, or designer clothing, she possessed the kind of beauty that made a room feel newly arranged around her. Yet Mason noticed something more important. She looked rested. "Daniel will arrive within an hour," she said. "The studio is sending attorneys." "To protect you?" Mason asked. "To protect the movie. There is a difference. A very expensive one." Her phone rang before he could answer. Daniel's voice filled the kitchen through the speaker. "Do not leave the house. Do not post again. Do not speak to local media." Ava leaned back. "Good morning to you too. The studio board is furious. The premiere may be postponed, and sponsors are asking questions. About what? About your judgment. Mason turned toward the sink, but Ava saw the way the words landed. My judgment led me to a decent man who helped me without expectation. The public does not understand nuance. Then perhaps the public deserves more of it. Daniel lowered his tone. There is another problem. Grant Holloway contacted the studio. He claims Mason staged the roadside meeting to save his failing business. Mason faced the phone. That is false. False stories travel quickly when someone provides documents, Daniel replied. He sent photographs of the bank notice and records of the property debt. Lily's spoon stopped against the bowl. Ava's expression sharpened. How did he get private financial records? That is being investigated. No, Mason said. I know how. Grant once helped arrange the shop loan. He had access to the paperwork. Ava looked at him. Why would he do this? He wants the land. A hotel company plans to build near the interstate extension. 3 sentences. 3 facts. 1 ugly truth. The kitchen fell quiet as the pieces joined together. Grant had not offered help. He had been waiting for Mason to fail. Daniel continued. The studio recommends a statement separating Ava from the mechanic immediately. His name is Mason Reed, she said, and I will not abandon him because a wealthy man found a convenient lie. Then the board may suspend your contract. Ava looked across the table at Lily, then toward the photograph of Claire above the stove. Let them. Mason stepped closer. Do not throw away your work. For my shop, this is not about a building. Her voice softened. It is about whether truth still matters when lying becomes profitable. Before anyone answered, a sound rose beyond the porch. Not shouting. Not cameras. Engines. Mason opened the curtain and found pickups, sedans, and farm trucks lining both sides of the road. Mechanics, teachers, nurses, ranchers, and former customers stood beside them holding handmade signs. One read, Reed Automotive kept us moving. Another said, Dignity is not for sale. At the front of the gathering stood Grant Holloway, surrounded by reporters, wearing the confident smile of a man who believed the town had come to watch Mason surrender. Then the mayor stepped onto the porch carrying a folder of receipts. Mason, she called. These people brought every invoice you reduced, every repair you completed without payment, and every family you helped when nobody else would. Grant's smile disappeared. Ava moved beside Mason as the mayor raised the folder for the cameras. The truth about this man has been documented for 15 years. No one cheered. No one needed to. The silence that followed was not empty. It was the sound of an entire town choosing respect. The mayor descended the porch steps and placed the folder on the hood of her truck, where reporters could see years of handwritten receipts, reduced labor charges, and unpaid balances Mason had quietly forgiven. Mrs. Caldwell needed a new alternator after her husband died. The Parker family could not afford brakes before Christmas. Mason repaired the school bus during a snowstorm and refused payment. Each name carried another memory, and each memory stripped weight from Grant Holloway's accusation. Grant adjusted his jacket and stepped toward the cameras. Generosity does not erase debt. The property is still facing foreclosure. Mason walked into the yard with Ava and Lily beside him. He wore no suit and offered no performance. That is true, he said. I owe the bank money. A murmur moved through the crowd. Grant smiled again. Then you admit the business is failing. I admit I made choices. Mason looked at the families gathered along the road. Sometimes I chose to keep a mother's car running instead of charging full price. Sometimes I delayed my own payment so a farmer could reach his fields. Those decisions may not impress a balance sheet, but I will not be ashamed of them. The morning air became completely still. Ava watched him with quiet admiration. In Hollywood, people spent fortunes creating heroic speeches. Mason needed only the truth. Grant opened his mouth, but the mayor raised another document. There is more. The county reviewed the proposed interstate project last night. Mr. Holloway purchased nearby parcels before the route became public. Reporters turned toward him. That information was confidential, one asked. Did you use it to pressure local owners? Grant's confidence faltered. I followed legal investment opportunities. Did you obtain Mason's financial records through your former connection to his loan? Another voice called. He looked toward his sedan, searching for an exit that dignity would not provide. Ava stepped forward. Her appearance was radiant in the clean morning light, yet her expression held no vanity, only resolve. Yesterday, This man protected me when exploiting my name could have solved his problems. Today, I will return that respect without purchasing his pride. Mason looked at her. Ava, please let me finish. She faced the crowd. My father grew up 20 miles from Bellwood. The Mustang was the first car he restored after leaving home. I came here because tomorrow marks 10 years since his death, and I wanted to drive the road he loved without cameras turning grief into entertainment. The revelation silenced even the reporters. Mason did not know my identity. He did not ask for money. He did not ask for attention. He saw a stranded woman and chose grace. Ava then turned toward the mayor. My production company needs a permanent workshop for a national program that teaches automotive skills to teenagers from struggling families. Reed Automotive is the right partner, but only if Mason owns it, leads it, and approves every decision. Grant gave a bitter laugh. That is charity disguised as business. Mason answered before Ava could. Then show me the contract. Daniel Price arrived carrying a leather case, followed by 2 attorneys and a representative from the bank. The offer provided full market rent, funding for new equipment, paid apprenticeships, and enough advance revenue to clear the overdue loan. Ownership remained entirely with Mason. He read every page while the gathering waited. No hidden purchase option, he asked. None, Ava said. No control over local customers? None. And Lily gets to choose the color of the classroom? Ava smiled. That condition is non-negotiable. Lily raised both hands. Blue. Mason signed only after the bank representative confirmed each term. No celebration erupted immediately. The importance of the moment was too deep for noise. Grant stood near the road, surrounded by questions he could no longer dismiss, while Mason held the pen above Claire's name engraved on his old keychain. Ava reached for Lily's hand, but did not touch Mason. She understood that some victories deserved space. Then he looked at her and said, My wife believed this place should give people second chances. Ava's eyes filled with restrained emotion. Then let us make sure it never stops. Across the yard, the first person began to clap. Soon the sound spread through Bellwood, not for wealth, fame, or revenge, but for a quiet man whose goodness had finally become impossible to overlook. 6 months later, Reed Automotive no longer looked like a business waiting to disappear. The brick walls had been cleaned, the service bays carried new equipment, and a blue classroom stood where the storage room had once collected dust. Lily had chosen the color herself, then insisted on painting a small silver star above the door. Every Saturday, teenagers from 3 surrounding counties arrived to learn diagnostics, restoration, and the discipline of finishing what they started. Mason taught them how to listen to an engine before touching a tool. Ava taught them something harder to measure, how to enter a room without allowing other people to decide their worth. She still traveled for films, interviews, and premieres, but Bellwood had become the place where her name stopped arriving before she did. The townspeople protected that peace without being asked. They greeted her at the grocery store, saved her a booth at the diner, and never raised a phone when she sat beside Lily at school events. Fame had followed Ava everywhere. Respect had finally given her somewhere to return. On the anniversary of her father's passing, Mason completed the Mustang's restoration. He replaced the aging lines, rebuilt the carburetor, polished the chrome, and repaired a small tear in the passenger seat by hand. He refused to change the faded mark on the dashboard where her father had once rested his coffee mug. That belongs to the story, he explained. Ava stood beneath the garage lights, breathtaking in a simple cream sweater and jeans, her gray eyes shining as she touched the steering wheel. You remembered everything. Some things should not be made new, Mason said. They should be made strong enough to continue. Lily appeared from the office holding 3 paper cups of hot chocolate. Are we taking the drive or talking about it all night? Ava laughed and handed Mason the keys. You drive. It is your car. It was my father's. Tonight, I think he would approve. They followed the old highway beyond Bellwood as the evening sun settled over the Tennessee hills. Lily sat in the back seat, describing plans for the next class and suggesting that every student should receive a jacket with a silver star. Ava listened, occasionally glancing toward Mason. He drove with one hand resting lightly on the wheel, no longer carrying every worry alone. At the overlook where her father used to stop, they parked beside a field washed in golden light. Lily wandered a few yards away to collect wildflowers, leaving the adults near the hood. The studio offered me another 3-picture contract, Ava said. That sounds important. It used to sound like everything. Mason waited without pushing her toward an answer. I accepted 1 film, she continued. Then I requested 4 months here. Daniel agreed. Daniel discovered that I am difficult to replace. Mason smiled. I had already noticed. Ava looked toward the valley. I spent years believing love would require me to become smaller, quieter, easier to manage. Love should not ask a person to disappear. No, it should recognize them when the world does not. She turned toward him. There was no audience, no prepared speech, and no need for grand promises. Mason, I do not need you to rescue me. Good, because I think you already did that yourself. But I would like to build something honest with you. He looked toward Lily, who was arranging flowers on a flat stone, then back at the woman who had entered his life beside a silent engine. Honest takes time. I have time. Mason reached for her hand. Then we begin there. Lily returned and placed a flower behind Ava's ear before taking both their hands. The 3 of them stood facing the last light of day, connected not by wealth, loss, or public approval, but by the second chance they had chosen to give one another. Far below, cars moved along the highway like small points of brightness. None of the drivers knew that a quiet act beside that road had restored a business, healed an old grief, and formed a family still learning its shape. That was the grace of goodness. It rarely announced itself when it arrived. It simply remained, grew roots, and waited until even the most wounded hearts were ready to call it home.